You lived a whole life before you turned 3. You loved, you learned, you discovered the world, and you remember absolutely none of it. Not one single second. Why? Most people shrug and say, your brain wasn't ready yet. But that's not true. The real answer is much stranger and a little heartbreaking. I'm going to take you inside your own missing years, and by the end, you'll never look at a baby the same way again. Because here's the first hook. Your baby brain wasn't failing to record your life. It was recording everything. So what happened? Something destroyed those memories. And it wasn't time. In 1905, Sigmund Freud gave this mystery a name: infantile amnesia. But for over a century, the question remained: can babies even form memories at all? The answer when it came was a bombshell. In the 1980s, psychologist Carolyn Rovi Collier ran an experiment that was as simple as it was brilliant. She tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging above the crib. The babies learned fast, kick, and the mobile dances. They loved it. But that wasn't the shock. Days later, she brought the same babies back, without the ribbon. The moment they saw the mobile, they started kicking. They remembered. 2-month-olds could hold a memory for days. 6-month-olds for weeks, so the machinery was working. Infants could learn, store, and retrieve. But if that's true, why is your own babyhood a complete blank? The first clue is physical. Deep in your brain, there's a seahorse-shaped structure called the hippocampus. It's the engine of memory. In adults, it works hand-in-hand with the prefrontal cortex to tag experiences and file them away as episodes you can replay. But in infants, that whole system is severely underdeveloped. Connections are still being wired. A critical gateway called the dentate gyrus isn't fully functional until age 2 to 4. So, your infant brain could grab short-term memories, but it couldn't ship them into long-term storage. They were written in sand, and the tide came in before they could set. But that's only half the picture. And the next part is where things get genuinely unsettling. In 2014, 2 neuroscientists in Toronto, Sheena Jocelyn and Paul Frankland, had a hypothesis that sounded almost absurd. What if the very process that builds your brain is also what destroys your earliest memories? What if growing up requires forgetting? Here's what they meant. In your first years of life, your hippocampus is producing new neurons at an explosive rate. This is called neurogenesis, and it's essential. Those fresh brain cells are what wire up the circuits you'll use for the rest of your life. But Jocelyn and Franklin suspected there was a hidden cost. Every time a new neuron slots into an existing circuit, it disrupts the connections that were already there. Connections that were holding your memories. To prove it, they turned to mice. When they artificially boosted neurogenesis in adult mice, the mice started forgetting things they'd previously learned. And when they slowed neurogenesis in infant mice, the infants held onto their memories much longer than normal. The results, published in the journal Science, pointed to a deeply counterintuitive truth. Your baby brain wasn't too weak to hold memories. It was too busy growing. The same explosion of new neurons that built your mind also wiped the slate clean. Your earliest experiences weren't lost because they were never saved. They were lost because your brain kept building new rooms and tearing down the old walls in the process. But there's yet another layer, and this one might be the strangest of all. To form what scientists call autobiographical memory, the kind where you are the main character of an experience you can replay in your mind, you need something most of us take for granted. You need a sense of self. Before roughly 18 to 24 months, infants don't recognize themselves as distinct individuals. The classic test is almost absurdly simple. Put a dot of rouge on a baby's nose and place them in front of a mirror. Before 18 months, babies treat the reflection like another child. They smile, they wave, but they don't reach for the mark on their own face. After 18 months, they do. They realize that the person in the mirror is them. That moment, the birth of self-recognition, closely tracks with the earliest age at which autobiographical memories can form. In other words, you can't remember being a baby, partly because there was no you yet. No narrator inside your head, just raw sensation passing through a mind that had no center. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If you had no continuous sense of self, and the brain that held your earliest experiences physically rewired itself beyond recognition, is the baby in your old photos actually you? Or is it someone else entirely? Someone who lived in the same body, but whose mind was literally disassembled and rebuilt, neuron by neuron, into the person you became. There's one more piece to this puzzle: language. Developmental psychologist Catherine Nelson spent years studying how children form lasting memories. Her conclusion? Language doesn't just describe our memories. It structures them. Before you could speak, your experiences were encoded as raw sensory impressions. Sounds, textures, emotions, light. But without words to organize them, those impressions had no framework. Once children start speaking, and especially once they have conversations with adults about past events, remember when we went to the park? Their ability to form lasting memories improves dramatically. Language gives memory a skeleton. Without it, experiences are like water with no container. They exist in the moment, then they're gone. And this isn't just theory. Psychologist Chi Wong at Cornell found that the age of your earliest memory varies depending on your culture. In Western cultures, where parents frequently narrate their children's experiences, earliest memories start around age 3.5. Among the Maori of New Zealand, whose oral tradition places huge emphasis on personal history and storytelling, first memories reach all the way back to age 2.5. In some East Asian cultures, where narratives focus less on the individual, first memories start closer to age 4 or later. The culture you grow up in literally shapes how far back your memory reaches. So what actually happened to your earliest years? It wasn't one thing. It was everything, all at once. Your hippocampus wasn't ready. The flood of new neurons tore through the circuits that held your memories. You had no sense of self to anchor experiences to. And you had no language to give those experiences a structure that could survive. Every human who has ever lived went through this. Every person you've ever met has a black hole where the first years of their life should be. But the reason isn't that your brain was too simple. It's that your brain was doing something far more important than remembering. It was becoming you, and that required, quite literally, destroying the person who came before. The baby in those old photos laughed, cried, loved, and learned. And then they were gone. Not dead, just dissolved. Replaced by a slightly older child who carried forward almost nothing of that original consciousness. You'll never be able to thank them. You'll never even know them. But somewhere in the architecture of your brain, they're still there. Not as a memory, as a foundation,